Subscribe if you dare. The Child in the Rain. Never offer your umbrella. They say if you ever see a lost child crying in the rain at night, don't stop. Don't ask questions. And above all, never offer your umbrella, no matter how innocent they look, because the rain isn't there to soak them. It's there to trap you. This story comes from the mountains of Laguna, where rain falls almost every night and fog rolls in like a blanket, hiding things that don't belong in our world. Things that look human, sound human, but aren't. It happened to Alma, a teacher who was staying late at school preparing lessons when a storm rolled in. The kind of rain that turns the road into a river, lightning cracking like broken glass across the sky. She packed her things and began walking home slowly, carefully, holding her small red umbrella through the storm. Halfway along the path, she saw a child, maybe 7 or 8, barefoot, soaked, standing alone beside the road, head down, arms limp, wearing a white shirt and shorts, clinging wet to small legs. The child wasn't moving, wasn't crying, just standing completely still. Alma paused, instincts telling her something was wrong, but her heart ached, thinking maybe this was someone's lost son caught in the storm. She took a step closer, softly asked, "Anak nasaan ang nanay mo?" But the child didn't reply, didn't move, didn't even shiver. She took another step closer, holding out her umbrella, whispering, "Halika sumilong ka dito baka makasakit ka." That's when the child slowly lifted his head, eyes black like wet stone, no reflection, no light, and smiled, mouth torn too wide, cheeks stretching unnaturally, and then finally whispered, "Ikaw na ang nanay ko." Before Alma could react, her umbrella snapped backward as if yanked by a powerful wind, though the air around her was still. The child stepped forward, without walking, feet sliding over the wet road, arms raising, slowly reaching toward her. She turned, ran, heart thundering her footsteps, splashing through the puddles. But every echo was wrong. She only heard one set of steps, hers. Even though she felt something was following, she didn't dare look back. The rain grew heavier, colder. The wind howled, but only behind her, as if something was chasing but never touching. Yet the weight of its eyes pressed on her back like claws. She reached her house, burst inside, locked the doors, collapsed on the floor, gasping for air, only then realizing she was still holding the umbrella, still open, still dripping, and it wasn't red anymore. It was white, stained muddy, soaked and small, like a child's. She dropped it, hands shaking, heart pounding. Then a knock came, soft, slow, at the window. Tuck, tuck, tuck. She crept closer, pulled the curtain aside just slightly, and there he was. The same child standing in her yard, soaked, smiling eyes locked on hers, raising a hand slowly to wave. But his hand was wrong. The fingers too long, too thin, bending backward like broken twigs. That night, Alma didn't sleep. The knocking continued, never angry, never loud, just slow and patient, like someone waiting outside knowing the door would open. Eventually, every day after, she'd find small wet footprints inside the house. Even when all doors were locked, her things moved. Toys she didn't own appeared on the floor. A child's laugh echoed through the halls whenever it rained. She asked a local elder, who only nodded solemnly and said, "May mga bata sa ulan na hindi na dapat tinutulungan. Kasi minsan hindi na sila bata. Minsan ulan na lang ang natira." They say the boy was once real, lost during a flood, never found, drowned and forgotten. And now when storms come, he looks for someone to replace what he lost, someone to follow, someone to love, someone to claim. And when you offer kindness, when you offer an umbrella, that's when he chooses you. To this day, whenever it rains, people in the area walk faster, ignore the cries of children in the distance, and never ever offer their umbrella, because once you do, the child in the rain never lets go. The midnight choir never sing along. There's a church in a remote town in Pampanga, old, silent, buried in the hills, where even the bells haven't rung in decades, its doors sealed by rust and prayers, its windows broken by storms. But some say that every Friday at midnight, when the moon is hidden and the air turns still, you can hear singing, not the joyful kind, not the kind that lifts your soul, but a choir that echoes from within the empty halls. Voices layered soft and slow, dragging like ancient hymns whispered by mouths that forgot how to breathe. This is the story of Celeste, a choir member from Manila who volunteered to document old churches for her university thesis. She traveled alone, determined and skeptical, recording architecture and legends, collecting photos and local tales until she reached the town where no one wanted to speak about their church. The priest she met refused to say the name of the chapel, only whispered, "Hindi lahat ng kantagaling sa Dios, at hindi lahat ng tinig dapat sabayan." Still she pushed on, curious, bold, and before dusk she climbed the muddy trail to the church, tall, narrow, dark vines wrapped around its stone like it was being pulled back into the earth. Birds silent, wind still. Even the trees leaned away, as if afraid of touching its walls. She entered flashlight in hand, camera ready, each step echoing against dust-covered pews, air thick and cold like it had never been breathed out, only in bare. At the altar, she set up her recorder and sat to write. But as the clock struck midnight, the sound began. Softly behind her, a single note, humming low, almost a vibration. Then it built, slowly, voices joining, not in harmony, but in layers out of sync, like many mouths trying to remember how the song used to go. She turned and saw nothing but the sound grew louder, now not just from the altar but from the walls, the ceiling, even beneath the floor. Her flashlight flickered. Shadows moved not away from the light but toward it. Arms long, thin, draped in robes that shifted like smoke, their faces hidden by veils made of cobwebs and dust. Then the song changed, no longer just a hymn, now a chant, slow, heavy, filled with words she didn't understand. But her mouth started to move on its own, repeating the sounds she had never learned. Her throat tightening, her tongue growing numb, as if something was borrowing her voice. She tried to stop, but her body kept swaying, her fingers tapping her feet, moving in rhythm to the dead choir, the song now vibrating the very floor, shaking the dust from every crevice, whispering ancient names into her ears. In the pulpit, she saw them standing, rows of rotting choir boys, their robes, shredded eyes empty, mouths wide, singing as if their lives depended on it, though they had long lost their breath. And in the middle, a girl no older than 10 stood conducting with her arms raised, a rosary wrapped tightly around her neck. Her head turned slowly towards Celeste and smiled, a smile that broke wide with cracked teeth, eyes leaking black. Her voice louder than the rest as she sang her name. "Celeste, Celeste, sabay ka na." Celeste screamed, broke the trance, grabbed her things and ran. But the doors were gone, replaced by stone, the windows pulsing like lungs, breathing in her panic. Every step echoed back twice like someone was running with her or chasing her. When she finally burst through the back sacristy, the wind returned, the stars reappeared, and the night was suddenly normal. But she never looked back, never stopped running. Later, when she reviewed her recordings, the audio was corrupted except one clip, clear, perfect in tone. The choir singing a single verse over and over. Ang pumasok dito ay hindi na lalabas. She burned the tape, erased the files, but still every Friday night at midnight, she hears them again. Even in the city, from her closet, from under the floorboards, faint voices whispering her name, asking her to finish the hymn. Locals say the choir was real children from the town taken during a storm years ago. Never found. Said to have drowned in the river nearby. But the priest always believed they were buried beneath the church, offered as a final prayer to silence whatever had awakened there. And now the choir sings, not to praise, but to call those who dare listen, those who wander too far, those foolish enough to sing along. The last guest never leaves. In many small towns in the Philippines, people still hold wakes at home, candles flickering all night, loved ones keeping watch, stories whispered, food shared to pass the long hours. They say it's a sacred time, a chance for the soul to say goodbye. But sometimes something else shows up, something that wasn't invited, something that doesn't leave. This is the story of Joaquin, a working student who returned to his hometown in Batangas to attend the funeral of his grandfather. A quiet man respected by all the barangay, filled with people night after night, offering prayers and memories. But on the fourth night, something changed. It started with the candles. 6 of them surrounding the casket, 1 at each corner, 2 at the feet, and head burning steady until the moment the clock struck 2 a.m. And the flame of the candle near the head flickered once, then turned blue, then went out. Nobody noticed at first. Everyone was asleep, except Joaquin and his cousin Elena. They were playing sungka, trying to stay awake, when Joaquin said he felt cold, and the air shifted like someone else had entered, but the door never opened. Then came the footsteps, soft, slow, from the kitchen to the sala, 1 step at a time, bare feet dragging on the cement floor. Elena thought it was their Tito getting water until they saw him snoring in the corner. Then they heard the footsteps again, this time walking around the casket. Not fast, not slow, just circling. They stood up quietly, scanned the room but saw nothing. Yet Joaquin swore he felt someone brushing past him, cold, skinless and wet, like something pulled from a river. Then the candle at the feet went out by itself, and the smell of damp earth filled the room. Elena grabbed his arm, whispered, "May bumu belong sa tenga ko, di ko mantindihan." Her lips pale, her eyes wide and shaking. But when Joaquin leaned in to listen, he heard it too. Faint, broken words like a voice, buried underground, whispering between breaths. Hindi pa tapos ang lamay. Hindi pa tapos ang lamay. Then the corpse moved. Not much, just the fingers curling slightly, the lips parting just enough to let a fly escape, as if something had been hiding inside. Then the curtain at the window lifted, as if pulled from the outside. And through the gap, they saw someone standing in the garden, tall, thin, wrapped in funeral cloth, its face covered in veil, its head slowly tilting toward them, even though no wind blew. They turned off the lights, huddled behind the altar, but the knocking began, not on the door, not on the walls, but on the casket. Slow, deliberate knuckles against wood. Talk, 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 followed by a long sigh that came from nowhere and everywhere. Then the prayer started, not from anyone in the room, but from behind the casket, an old woman's voice whispering a version of the Amanamin twisted backward, each word stretched like a rope tightening around their necks. Joaquin felt his chest sink, something heavy pressing down, something crawling over his skin, like fingers tracing his ribs. They tried to wake the others, but no one moved, as if frozen, eyes shut too tightly, breaths too shallow like they were asleep but not resting. The old wall clock struck 3 with a loud metallic clang, and suddenly everything stopped. The candles reignited all at once. The room warmed, the door shut by itself, and the figure in the garden was gone. When the family woke, they remembered nothing, only that their dreams were filled with chanting and the sound of digging. The next day before the burial, they noticed something strange. The casket was heavier, not by much, but enough that 4 men struggled to lift it. And inside the lid, deep scratch marks were carved, like something inside had tried to claw its way out. Joaquin never returned to that town after the funeral, but every All Souls Day he hears knocking on his bedroom window. 3 soft taps followed by a low whisper. Lamay, hindi patapos. And when he looks outside, no matter where he lives, no matter how high his floor, he always sees a shadow in the distance, standing under a flickering street lamp, watching, not moving, waiting. They say sometimes a spirit clings too tightly, not because it's afraid to go, but because it's not alone. Something else joined the wake, something that arrived when the candle turned blue and stayed when no one noticed the last guest, the one who never leaves. The extra chair, never leave it empty. In many provinces during funerals, families prepare more than what's needed: extra food, extra candles, even extra chairs. It's tradition not just for visitors from far away, but also for those unseen, the ones who still arrive in silence. This story happened to Ram, a tricycle driver from a quiet barangay in Quezon. When his father died, the family held the wake in their ancestral home, as tradition calls it, lasted for 9 days. Every night they kept the lights on, offered prayers, and made sure the guests were fed. They also placed 1 chair near the casket facing away from the body, a chair no one was allowed to touch. Ram asked his Lola about it, and she simply said, "May mga bisita na hindi mo makikita, pero kailangan pa rin silang igalang." Everything was normal until the sixth night. That's when people began to notice something strange. The food on one plate was always half-eaten, even if no one sat there. The coffee turned cold faster. The candle near the chair burned lower than the rest, and when no one was looking, the chair would be found slightly turned, as if someone had shifted in their seat. Ram tried to laugh it off, told himself it was the wind or imagination, until one night he was the last one awake, sitting beside the casket, keeping watch. Around 3 a.m. the room grew cold. Suddenly the candle flame swayed inward like something had entered quietly, slowly. Then the chair creaked. He turned his head slowly and saw it move just a little forward, like someone was leaning in to look at the body. And then he heard it, a breath, soft, low, shaky, like someone trying to cry but couldn't fully remember how. Then a whisper, not from around him, but from right behind his ear. Bakit mo ako kinalimutan? Ram jumped, stumbled back, knocked over a lamp, but when he looked around no one was there, only the chair, now turned slightly, and the floor beneath it wet, as if rainwater had pooled under unseen feet. In the morning his Lola pulled him aside, her voice low, almost trembling. "My hindi kayo naimbita, anak may isa kayong kapatid na hindi niyo nakilala, inilibing agad nung sanggol, at hindi nakalibing ng maayos." She said that sometimes when a soul is forgotten, when no one remembers their name or face or voice, they find their way back to where the family gathers, not to hurt but to be seen, to feel like they mattered even for a moment. On the final night of the wake, the family laid out one small baby blanket on the chair, placed a single white rose beside it. No prayers, no candles, just acknowledgement. And for the first time the candle burned evenly. The air warmed slightly, and no one heard footsteps or whispers again. But Ram says sometimes when he drives late at night past cemeteries or old chapels, he sees someone in his rearview mirror, sitting quietly on the sidecar wearing white, small, barely moving. And if he doesn't speak or turn on the radio, he hears the same soft voice saying, "Salamat kuya Nikita Morinako." They say when you hold a funeral and the room feels heavier than it should be, maybe someone else has joined. Maybe someone forgotten has returned. And if there's an empty chair, don't move it. Don't offer it to the living. Let them sit. Let them grieve. Because some goodbyes come too late, and some spirits just want to be seen, even if just once. The man in the corner never blinks. There's an old belief in southern provinces that during a wake, the soul of the dead lingers close. And if someone cries too hard or speaks of things not meant to be heard, it invites something else, something that listens from the shadows and waits. In a sleepy barangay in Camarines Sur, during the wake of an old farmer named Mang Eli, something strange unfolded. The family was close. The house small, the coffin placed in the center of the sala, with rows of plastic chairs facing it, surrounded by flowers and candles. Everyone stayed up every night playing cards, whispering stories, drinking coffee, trying to keep the night warm and the silence away. On the third night, it began with the dog whining, staring at the far corner of the room where no one sat. Everyone looked but saw only shadows, until one child, a boy named Paolo, whispered that a man was sitting there, tall, wearing a barong, his head bowed, his hands folded tight, and that he never blinked. They told Paolo to stop joking, but he refused to enter the sala again and cried when they tried to pull him back. The next night, the electric fan started spinning on its own, even when unplugged. The candles closest to the casket grew shorter than the rest, burning faster. The scent of burning wax mixing with something else like wet soil and old wood. Then, during the fourth night, around 1 a.m., a cousin named Janice stepped outside to make a call. When she returned, she was pale, shaking. Her voice cracked as she whispered that someone had been standing beside the coffin when she left. Tall, unmoving, but when she returned, no one was there. Yet she could still smell the scent of flowers, soaked in vinegar. From that night on, no one would sit on the last chair in the row closest to the corner, because it always felt cold, even if the rest of the house was hot. And every time someone sat there, they said it felt like someone behind them was breathing slowly, just inches from their ear. An elder in the barangay, who came to pay respects, looked around the room and refused to step inside. She only said one thing before leaving. "May basitang, hindi iniimbitahan, pero nandito siya, naghihintay ng pamalit." The family thought it was just an old tale until the final night of the wake. When all the guests had gone and only close relatives remained, they heard the sound of footsteps behind the casket, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing, and a whisper, repeating one name again and again. The youngest daughter stood up in the middle of the prayer, stared toward the corner and said, "He's still here. He wants to leave, but someone must look at him." Everyone froze. One brave uncle turned slowly, faced the corner, and for a second his body locked, his eyes wide. And when they pulled him away, he kept muttering, "He blinked. He blinked at me." After the burial, they sealed the coffin tightly, placed a small mirror inside, and burned the chair from the corner. But every now and then, on stormy nights, when someone dies nearby, people claim they see a tall man standing in the far corner of any room where candles are lit, his hands folded, his head low, waiting patiently, never blinking unless someone sees him. And if they do, he finally closes his eyes and follows. The one who sat beside her. In a small town somewhere in Nueva Ecija, there was a quiet funeral held for a woman named Aling Cora, known in the barangay for her kindness, her prayers, her herbal remedies, and the smell of sampaguita that always followed her wherever she went. She died peacefully, they said, but on the night her wake began, the scent of sampaguita turned stronger, too strong, not sweet anymore, but sharp, cloying, almost bitter, like wilted flowers soaked in rainwater. The house was full that night. Candles lined the walls, novena echoing over the murmurs of people eating in the back room. Her coffin sat open in the center of the sala, her face peaceful, her hands folded holding a small white rosary, and on the chair beside her casket someone sat quietly. At first, no one noticed the figure. The neighbors assumed it was a distant relative, dark clothes, head covered, hands resting on their lap, never moving, never speaking, just sitting beside Aling Cora with eyes that no one could quite describe. Mila, her niece, was the first to ask, "Sino po yon sa tabi ni Lola Cora?" But her mother looked and saw nothing, just an empty chair, a little dusty, and too close to the coffin. But later that night, when the visitors had gone home and only the family remained, Mila swore she saw the same figure again, this time standing behind the casket, head tilted, as if watching Aling Cora's sleeping face, gently, slowly leaning closer with every passing hour. The candles flickered constantly, shadows stretched too far across the floor, and somewhere between the third and fourth prayer, the air went cold. That's when the rosary broke. No one touched it, yet the white beads spilled from her hands one by one, clicking softly on the wood like tiny bones. And then everyone heard it. A whisper, not loud, but everywhere at once. "Hindi siya nagyasa." They searched the room. Nothing, no wind, no windows open, no prank, just silence, and a heavy scent of burnt sampaguita hanging in the air. The next morning, the chair beside the coffin had moved slightly, turned to face the door, as if someone had risen in the night, walked away, and left it behind. By the second night, no one sat near the coffin anymore. Even the bravest uncles avoided the front row. People whispered of cold breath on their necks, sudden weight pressing on their shoulders, and a pair of hands brushing against their back when no one was standing there. Mila stayed quiet until the fourth night, when she woke up screaming, claiming she saw Aling Cora standing at the foot of her bed, eyes wide, lips moving, but no sound coming out. Beside her was the same veiled figure watching silently, and Mila said she knew it wasn't a dream because the bed smelled of sampaguita, and her pillow was wet with tears that weren't hers. Before the burial, they tried to bless the chair, but the holy water sizzled against the wood like oil in a pan, and the priest told them to burn it quietly without looking back. After they did, the house grew calm again, the wake ended, the flowers dried, and the scent faded. But every year during Undas, the family hears soft footsteps in the hallway the night before the visit to the cemetery. The chair beside the altar gets moved just a little, and someone always leaves an extra flower behind a wilted sampaguita. No one remembers bringing. They say Aling Cora was never afraid to cross over, but someone came with her, someone she used to comfort, someone who followed her. Spirit quietly sat beside her and decided not to return. So now during funerals in that barangay, no one leaves a chair too close to the casket. No one dares sit alone in the front row, and no one ignores the smell of flowers that bloom without a garden. Because sometimes the dead bring company, and the one who sits beside them may not be ready to leave. If you enjoyed this terrifying story, Let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button to help us bring more cursed tales and dark legends to life. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, but warn them first. And if you dare, subscribe to this channel, because here in Pinoy Phobia, the horror never ends. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next cursed story, spine-chilling folklore, or true paranormal encounter from the shadows of the Philippines. Remember, some stories are meant to be heard, but others are meant to be warnings. Thank you for watching, and remember, whatever happens, don't look back.